values into action, moving our values into action. We're a pluralistic religion that finds wisdom in many sources, and so it's been a long day. I apologize, but when somebody asked if we would be willing to host this, and my first instinct was to say.
Over a decade ago, the Peace Center and the Center for Religious Tolerance hosted a series on Israel and Palestine titled Finding a Path to Peace. I learned much from that series, and one of the things that stuck with me was the separation that existed between the two peoples, Israelis and Palestinians, living right next door but having very little real experience of each other. So when I heard a conversation with Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger and Noor Awad following the October 7th attack on Israel, I heard them echo many of the things I already knew. But I also felt that the conversations they were having were important and might be able to do what we had failed to do during the Finding a Path to Peace series. And that was to reach people who might be on different sides of the issue and have them open their hearts and minds to a different perspective. I reached out only to find that they were already planning a U.S. speaking tour, and so here we are. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to our guest, but first I do want to make sure our Q&A period, we're actually going to ask you to write your questions down. So if you did not get a card and don't have anything to write with, but think you might have a question, if you could raise your hand and Tom can bring you a card. It looks like everyone except David. A couple more. Okay, so he's going to go get some cards and they'll walk through, okay, and get you those. And as they do that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the program over to Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger and Noor Awad. Thank you so much for being with us.
A great heartfelt thanks to our hosts, to our many hosts, and of course to all of you who've come out here tonight. So we are all getting on a plane together right now. And we're on our way to that little strip of land that you see on the map. It's a 12-hour plane flight, and we're landing at the Ben Gurion Airport in the state of Israel. We get off the plane and go through customs. We get on a bus all together. I think we can all fit. Perhaps there's two buses, I'm not sure. And we start traveling east and a little bit south. We're going in the direction of Jerusalem, but then we turn off to the right. We find ourselves climbing, ascending. The bus passes a checkpoint. We see soldiers, Israeli soldiers. The scenery starts to change. We see Palestinian villages on the left and on the right, Jabba. On the other side, we see Tzorif. We come to the Gush Etzion junction in the heart of Gush Etzion. And then the bus turns off onto a muddy road, a dirt road. We disembark and we go into this Palestinian farm, this farmstead. There's a home there. There's a classroom, bathrooms. There's a lot of animals, trees. We sit down in the classroom and we begin. I want to tell you about the classroom that we're now sitting in and the farmstead that is hosting us. Here's the background to where we are. We're in the West Bank. And in the West Bank, Palestinian Arabs live and Israeli Jews live. The thing is that they live very, very close to each other, but very far apart from each other. I mean, geographically, they're close, but in every other sense, culturally, economically, etc., they're worlds apart. You probably know that the Jews and the Palestinian Arabs speak different languages. They have different cultures, different religions, yes. But listen to this. They have different educational systems. That means whether it's preschool or elementary school, middle school, high school, up to and including university, completely separate there in the West Bank. You'll never, if you're a Jew, never meet a Palestinian in the classroom. Also, the health systems, whether it's the dentist, the doctor, the hospital, if you're rushed to the emergency room in the West Bank, you'll never meet the other. If you're a Palestinian, you'll never meet a Jew in the emergency room. Two separate health systems. The transportation systems are also separate. That means taxis and buses, they have theirs and they have theirs. Now, we do drive on the same roads sometimes, but we have different color license plates, so you always know who the other is. There's more. we live under two different legal systems. The Israeli Jews, like me, are citizens of the State of Israel. We vote. Recently, we've been voting very often. And the Palestinians are citizens of no country with no legal and civil rights. They have no country. And there we are living right next to each other. The economic system's also separate. There's even more bad news. There's no common ground, but I don't mean that as a metaphor. I mean literally there's no common ground. I mean this. The ground is separate. Palestinians live in their towns and villages and cities. Israelis live in their towns and villages and cities, and none the twain shall meet. It is illegal. It is illegal by Israeli military law that governs the West Bank for me as a Jew to visit Noor in his home, or to visit in any other Palestinian home or any Palestinian area. And for Noor to come to visit me in my home is also illegal. The only way Palestinians could enter Israeli residential areas is if they're menial workers under armed guard with work permit during work hours coming to build or to do construction or gardening. But in normal situations, this is 99% of the cases, even if there had been a strange Israeli and a strange Palestinian that wanted to have a cup of coffee together, there's just about no place to do it. Except for the classroom that you're now sitting in. We brought you on that plane ride and that bus ride to be in the only joint Israeli-Palestinian space in the whole West Bank. The only joint Israeli-Palestinian community center. And in this community center, it's called Merkaz Karama. Merkaz is the Hebrew word that means center. Karam is the Arabic word for dignity. In the dignity center, every day before the war, Palestinians, local Palestinians and local Palestinians were coming together to meet the other in photography workshops, in music workshops, in trauma workshops, in lots of interfaith dialogue, in the kids program, in the youth group, in the summer camp, the day camp, women's programs, playback, storytelling. We do a lot, or I should say we did a lot. In our activities, the people coming, the local Israelis and local Palestinians, if they've never been to an activity at the Dignity Center before, then they just probably, almost certainly never met the other side in their life. And you can see them sitting on two different sides of the room. Perhaps someone is nudging with his elbow his friend, "Why did you bring me here? Look at them, they're going to kill me." And people are really afraid. We begin to break the ice. It doesn't take that long. One session, an hour and a half, perhaps a second session, a third. It doesn't take that long to begin to get over the demonization that we hold towards the other. It turns out that they're human beings just like me. I can talk to them. We have some common interests. And this humanization is really, really important and really, really essential, but it's not the main thing we do. The most important thing in our eyes is the next step after the humanization. It's coming face to face, coming to terms with the fact that he or she that I just met from the other side has a completely different understanding of herself than I have of her. And her understanding of me is completely different than the understanding I have of myself. We live in two different worlds, two different understandings of the reality, and to begin to accept that her understanding of herself and even her understanding of me, even though it contradicts what I know about myself, also has some truth and some validity. That's really, really, really hard. And because of this work of bridging the gap, bringing the two sides together, I call our space, the Dignity Center, holy ground. And even more than holy ground, I call it a mental health clinic. Because I think that most Israelis, since October 7th, perhaps I should say all Israelis, and most Palestinians, and perhaps I should say all since October 7th, are sick in the heart. And I have a name for this disease that covers a lot of the symptoms. I call it the hubris of exclusivity. The hubris of exclusivity. And this virus courses through our veins, and it convinces us that the other side is not real, is not legitimate, doesn't belong here, and only my side has legitimacy, has connection to land, has truth and validity. And what happens in the activities of the Dignity Center, not always, and not immediately, and certainly not completely, is a little bit of healing. a little bit of healing in which I begin to realize that as true and legitimate and glorious as my identity is, there's another identity in this land that it belongs no less than my identity belongs. And again, that's really, really hard. At the end of my introduction now to the place we're sitting in, I'll just say that the Dignity Center was established and is run by Roots. In Arabic, that's Judur. In Hebrew, Shorashim, the Israeli-Palestinian grassroots initiative for understanding nonviolence and transformation. And where we're sitting is between Bethlehem and Hebron. I think you can see it on the map. We're sitting equidistant between Bethlehem and Hebron in the Dignity Center. And now we're going to show you a 2-minute clip that's a trailer from an Israeli television documentary that was made about Roots in the Dignity Center 7 years ago. From the very beginning, you'll see the Dignity Center, and you'll see the Palestinian founder of the Dignity Center, Ali Abu Awwad.
נמצאים כאן באדמה של המשפחה שלי. כשבאתי לכאן והחלטתי להקים מרכז פלסטיני שלי אלימות, אני מצפה שיתקפו אותי גם בחברה שלי וגם באוכלוסייה של המתנחלים. אבל אני יודע, כל עוד שאנחנו לא מדברים עם הימין, השמאל לא יעשה שלום.
The first time I had heard someone talk about being in Israeli jail, someone talking about suffering under occupation.
וזה שאני מכבד אותך, זה הכבוד שאני מכבד את עצמי כשאני מסתכל על עצמי בראי.
We believe that religion has to be part of the solution.
Allahu Akbar. Adonai hu Elohim.
יהודים ניצודים בארץ ישראל כמו חיות, ממש. פשוט צדים אותם. רואים רכב, איפה הם? איפה השותף? איפה האח?
אתה יושב על הכלכלה שלי, אתה יושב על הבית שלי, אתה יושב על הלב שלי, אבל לא כשותף.
האם אתה מוכן להודות שהישיבה שלך פה היא ישיבה של פשע? וממילא תגיד לי מבחינה פוליטית.
The Jewish people, we own this land? We don't own this land. We belong to this land. And the Palestinian people also belong to this land.
אנחנו האחרונים בעולם שצריך לשבת אחד עם השני. באתי לבקש לדרוש איתם מחדש. מפני שאת ואני סבלנו שלא חיפשנו את זה לפני.
You've already heard that my name is Hanan Schlesinger. I've been a rabbi my whole life, and I'm going to introduce myself with 3 labels. I'm a Jew, and I'm a Zionist, and I'm a settler. When I say I'm a Jew, I am an observant Jew, a religious Jew, but I'm not talking about religion when I say I'm a Jew. I'm talking primarily about peoplehood. The sense that we are the Jewish people, that we've been on this earth for 3,000 years, we have a common destiny. We see other Jews around the world as connected to us in a very deep fashion. And just about every Jew knows, on some level or another, that from the very beginning of the Jewish people, we've been connected to the land of Canaan, today called the land of Israel. In other words, we're not just a religion, we are a people, something very close to a nation, connected to its land. And because of that deep connection between the Jewish people and the Jewish land, I can, from my personal perspective, move seamlessly from talking about myself as a Jew to talking about myself as a Zionist. For me, Zionism is nothing more than a fulfillment, a consummation of the fullness of Jewish existence. Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people, founded about 150 years ago, to bring the Jewish people home. What do I mean by that? Well, some of you might know that it was only about 30 years after the death of Jesus, in the year 70 of the Common Era, that the Romans destroyed the Second Jewish Commonwealth. Our common people and our judges, our rabbis, our scholars, our priests, and the king were sent into exile, those that weren't killed. And within a few decades, we found ourselves scattered in the Middle East, in Northern Africa, in Europe. Hundreds and thousands of years later, we made it to Australia and to the US. And during all of these 2 millennia of exile, the Jewish people have had a sense that we are in limbo. We're not where we're meant to be. We are in the diaspora. And we've been yearning and hoping and praying, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, to come home to where we belong. And there's about 3 million Jews around the world that were brought home through the Zionist movement. One of them is standing here right now, me. I was born in New York, and when I was 18, I picked up my 2 bags, I got on the plane, and what I did is, we say in Hebrew, Asiti Aliyah. I made the ascent to the Holy Land. And it was a deep sense of consummation, of closing the circle, fulfilling the dreams and the hopes of my great-great-great-great-grandmother and grandfather who yearned to come to the land of Israel and weren't able to fulfill those dreams. After I said I'm a Jew, and I said I'm a Zionist, I said I'm a settler, which means that I'm an Israeli citizen, a Jewish Israeli citizen, who moved over the Green Line. If we can look at the map for a second, moved over the Green Line, which is the line separating Israel proper from the West Bank. The West Bank was conquered by Jordan in 1948 and occupied by Jordan until 1967 when Israel conquered it. So that the West Bank is in blue, Israel proper is in something like orange. The line separating them is the Green Line. I moved over the Green Line to settle in the West Bank. Now I know that being a settler has deep political implications. But what I want to say is, I didn't move where I moved to, and I don't live there for political reasons. I live there for historical reasons. And the historical reasons are the following. Because the Jewish people was born in the West Bank. And during the 1,000 years when the Jewish people lived in the land of Israel, we almost never made it to the coastal cities, to Haifa, to Tel Aviv, Ashdod. That was the land of the Philistines. Where did we settle? Where do we have our history? Where was the Bible written? The Old Testament, it's all in what today is called the West Bank. And if I've come home after 2,000 years, I want to come home to the cradle of Jewish civilization. I want to come home to the place where I can scratch the ground with my heel and come up with potsherds that our ancestors left 2,000 years ago that speak to me, those potsherds. They talk about the continuity of Jewish existence in the land, that I've come home. There's a chain of tradition. And for the same reason that I live there, I call it, usually not the West Bank, I call it Judea and Samaria. Judea and Samaria. And I understand, again, that calling it Judea and Samaria for many people sounds like a political statement. But I use that term not for politics, but rather, again, for history. I call it that because that's what the Jewish people have called it for the past 2,500 years. The land below Jerusalem to the south, where I live, and where the Dignity Center is the area of the ancient kingdom of Judea. And north of Jerusalem, above Jerusalem, is where the ancient kingdom of Samaria existed. And we've called it Judea and Samaria all these years. Why should I change the way that the Jewish people referred to the place? So there's a deep sense here of closing the circle, of being where Abraham and Sarah from the beginning of the book of Genesis walked and founded our people. It's very powerful. And then 10 years and 1 month ago, I began to realize that in a certain sense, I don't really know what I'm talking about. And I do not mean that everything I just said to you for the past 10 minutes is a lie. But I do mean that everything I just said to you for the past 10 minutes is only half of the truth. And for my whole life, I thought it was the whole truth. That's the problem. I don't believe the problem is in my truth. The problem is in my thinking that my truth is the only truth, the hubris of exclusivity. You see, until 10 years ago, I'd never met a Palestinian, even though there are 85%, let's say, of the people who live around me very close. But for all those years, 34 years, for me, the Palestinians didn't exist. I was blind. They were like the gray drab scenery that passes in the background of the movie, my movie, but are not part of the plot. You can ignore them. They're not there. And after I met Palestinians, I began to realize that they're there, they exist, they're real, they're legitimate, they have a story. And it turns out that their truth is as real as my truth. And to live your life, this is my philosophy, to live your life as if half of the truth is the whole truth is very close to falsehood. And I don't want to be there any longer. That's why I'm here. Thank you. So how did this happen? I'm driving my car 10 and a half years ago, 10 and a quarter years ago. In the area that I live, my village, my settlement is called Alon Shvut. It's in the area that we Jews called Gush Etzion, between Bethlehem and Hebron. And I had in the car with me two evangelical pastors from the U.S., from New Jersey and from Dallas, Texas. And they believe in the same Bible that we Jews believe in, the same prophets, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah. And they know that the prophets foretell that after long, hard exile, the Jewish people come home again. And in their belief, like my belief, the return of the exiles is right now. And they wanted to see how biblical prophecy is being fulfilled. So I showed them with great pride. I showed the roads, settlements, the towns, the villages that we've constructed. And as we're driving, I picked up a hitchhiker. A young man was on the side of the road with his finger out. I picked him up. And then I picked up another one. After a few minutes, the hitchhikers asked to get out of the car. I stopped, let them off. We started to drive again. And one of the pastors said to me the following words. He said, Hanan, that was great. You picked up hitchhikers. You taught us a lesson in Judaism. I've never seen that before. No one in Texas picks up hitchhikers. So I said to him, Bob Roberts, his name, I said, Bob, you know, it's not just me. Around here, we all pick up hitchhikers because we have a common vision. We trust each other. And just like everyone else, I said, I do my best to pick up every person who puts out his finger for a ride. And by the time I finished that sentence, I realized that I was lying. I was lying to Bob and Kevin. Even worse, I was lying to myself. I don't pick up every person who puts out his finger. I do my best to pick up every Jew. But at that moment, I said what I thought is true to Bob and Kevin. I pick up every person. And I felt at that moment very embarrassed that I had revealed my bigotry. How could I say that I pick up every person when I really meant I pick up every Jew? What that means is I don't see the Palestinians, or I don't see them as significant human beings. And I took upon myself at that moment, after a deep conversation with my two pastors, I took upon myself to do something about this. What does that mean? It means find a way to turn the Palestinians into human beings in my eyes and my heart. And the way to do it, it was clear to me, is to meet them. I began my journey to meet my Palestinian neighbors. Long story, I'll tell you the following. In the end of January 2014, finally I was invited to meet my Palestinian neighbors. I'm going to leave the house now and do it. I walked out the front door. Before I closed the door behind me, my wife called out and said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to meet Palestinians." And that's when all hell broke loose. So my wife starts to scream, "What do you mean? They'll kill you." And I came back in the home, and I approached my wife. I saw the absolute terror in her eyes. She asked me, "Don't do this." But I knew I had to do it. I closed the door behind me, and I remember saying to myself, perhaps she's right, perhaps they will kill me. My heart's pounding. I'm afraid. I walked through the fields and the orchards around my home. I didn't take the car. It was about a 25-minute walk. And according to the map I had, I walked into the compound, the farmstead that you guys are now sitting in the classroom there. But in those days, 10 years ago, 10 years and 1 month ago, there was no classroom. There was nothing there except a few trees. I walked in, and after a few steps, I saw the strangest thing. I saw 15 Israelis, some of them my neighbors, and 15 Palestinians You won't believe this. They were talking to each other. And that doesn't happen by us. They're in little groups. There's 2 over here, 3 over here. And then I saw a Palestinian woman who's standing alone. She's dressed in brown from head to toe. Only her face is visible. An observant Muslim, clearly. And I walked right up to her and I said hello in English. And she said hello back to me. We talked about a minute. And then I said to her, I cannot believe that I'm talking to you. And she said to me, I can't believe I'm talking to you because we don't talk to Israeli settlers. I had no idea back then why she doesn't talk to Israeli settlers. In any case, we kept talking. It didn't go on for a long time at all because our son walks over. She introduces me. His name is Yazin, she said, and he's 17 years old. So Yazin and I shake hands, and immediately I see that he's wearing a windbreaker. And on the jacket are 3 words in the English language, seeds of peace. Seeds of peace. Who knows what seeds of peace is? Anyone? Yeah, about 8 people, 10 people. So I had no idea in those days what seeds of peace is. But I remember looking at the jacket. It has the word peace on it. And the young man wearing the jacket is a Palestinian. And I say to myself, peace and Palestinian, that doesn't go together. Why is he wearing the jacket? What's going on here? So I said jokingly, or let's say half-jokingly, to Yazin, what's this seeds of peace thing? I thought he was going to tell me, I don't know, someone gave me the jacket, what does it matter? That's not what he said. He said that Seeds of Peace is a summer camp in Maine, USA, and it takes Israeli kids and Palestinian kids out of the conflict zone for a summer of recreation and reconciliation. He said he spent the past summer in the camp. He had a great time, met Israeli kids. They're friends on Facebook now. And he said he was so changed by meeting the Israelis that now he wants to spend some of his life building bridges of peace between our 2 peoples. And I remember listening to Yazin and not knowing if I can believe what he's saying, because it contradicts everything that I know to be true. And you might say that Yazin and his mother were the first Palestinians that began the process of unsettling me. His father walks over, Jamal. He's a stocky guy. Jamal and I shake hands. He asked me, where are you from? I said, I'm from Alon Shvut. Where are you from, Jamal? Beit Umar. He says those 2 words, Beit Umar, and I have half of a heart attack. Because I know Beit Umar. It's a Palestinian city of 23,000 Palestinians. It's about an 8-minute drive from my home going the direction of south. I passed by that road hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. My car's been stoned there. I had a friend who was gunned down and murdered, a doctor coming home from Hadassah Hospital late at night. So I know the people in Beit Umar, they're dangerous, they're terrorists. Now it turns out I talked to this woman, I talked to the young man, I'm talking to Jamal, and it wasn't the easiest thing in the world for me to continue the conversation. But we continued. And Jamal said to me, you know, Hanan, there's no Jews in Beit Umar. But there are the Jewish soldiers who guard the entrance to the city, and they make life miserable for us. They prevent us from going in and going out freely. We hate them. And since they're the only Jews we know, by extension we hate all Jews. There's no one in Beit Umar that would like to have a social interaction with a Jew. But he said a long time ago, he had a friend, Palestinian friend from the city of Jericho, and this friend said, come along with me. I go to a group of Israelis and Palestinians that meets once a month. And Jamal said to the friend, I'm never ever coming with you. That's only for the weak people and the traitors. A proud Palestinian doesn't go to meet the enemy. But the friend wouldn't get off his back. Every month is trying to convince him. So eventually Jamal tagged along, he told me. They sat in a circle, Jews and Palestinians. Jamal said he didn't participate. He sat in the corner, but he listened. And at one point, said Jamal, one of the Jewish men got up from his chair, and that made me a little uncomfortable. And he looked at me. I was really now getting uptight. He started walking towards me. I was afraid. He came right up to me, put out his hand. I had to shake his hand. Then he asked me questions. We had a really uncomfortable conversation. When he walked away finally, I wiped the sweat off my brow and ran to the bathroom to wash the filth off my hand from touching a Jew, and I vowed never to come back to this cursed place. And Jamal said he went home and told his wife what happened. She agreed that it was a traumatic experience, and now what has to happen is she said, never go back and never tell anyone in Beit Umar that you were there. But Jamal's friend had other plans, and I don't know how it happened, but eventually the 2 of them, Jamal and his wife, went back to that circle again and again and again. And Jamal then looked at me and he said, Hanan, where I thought there was only an enemy, I found a human being who turned out to be a partner, and that changed me. And I don't know what to do with this. How could this be? Jamal, he's a Palestinian. He's talking about becoming a peace activist. It's totally undoing me. It can't be. It's impossible. Jamal tells me another story. Hanan, you know, there's lots of little kids in Beit Umar, okay? 5 years old, 8 years old. Hanan, when the kids look at someone like you, they start to cry. He said, why do they start to cry? And he didn't understand why I don't understand. Finally he said, it's the kippah you have on your head, and it's the beard, and those things hang from your pants. Because so many people dressed like you, he said, walk into Beit Umar with their submachine guns. He does like this, and they kill the kids. So I thought that was a blood libel. That's borderline anti-Semitism. We don't do things like that. What are you talking about? And of course I said to myself, I have to tell him off. And the rage is developing inside me, and just before I blurted out what I wanted to say, I stopped myself. A light bulb went off in my mind, and I realized that this is a moment of blessing. Because for the first time in my life, I'm experiencing how the other experiences me. And that could be a blessing if you, Hanan, if I'm able to hold that. It wasn't easy. I didn't say anything. I'm trying to figure it out. And then I have a vision, like a flash in my mind, and I see my son-in-law and my 2 grown sons with their kids and their wives in the fields around our house taking a family walk. And I see, of course, that the 3 young fathers are all carrying pistols. And for the first time in my life, I said to myself, wow, those guns must be frightening to little Palestinian kids. And then I said to Jamal, what do you want? We carry guns because we're afraid of you. And he said, no, you're not afraid of us. We're afraid of you. That was extremely confusing. What are they afraid of? We don't use those guns. They're only for self-defense. We're peace-loving people. And I walked away from the conversation with Jamal and his wife and his son utterly confused. Utterly confused. A lot of things happened that afternoon. We met a lot of people. At the end, we sat in a circle, 15 Israelis and 15 Palestinians. And Ali Abu Awwad, the Palestinian convener of that get-together and the owner of the land on which we were convening, Ali got up to talk. That's the same Ali you saw in the film just now. And Ali said, in perfect Hebrew that turns out he learned for many years in Israeli jail, Ali said, my name is Ali Abu Awwad. I'm from a proud Palestinian family for generations who lived in Kubeiba. And I said to myself, what's Kubeiba? Where's Kubeiba? He said, in 1948, in the wake of the war between the Jews and the Palestinians, the family was forced to leave. And later the Israelis, he said, turned Kubeiba into Lachish. And Lachish, I know where it is, a half-hour drive from my house in the direction of Ashkelon in the Mediterranean Sea. The whole clan, he said, from Kubeiba came to Beit Umar in the West Bank, settled there, living under Jordanian occupation. 1967, the Jews came, and since then, he said, we're living under the rigors and the difficulty and the suffering of the Israeli occupation. Israeli occupation? Never in my life, at that point, had I heard a human being in my presence use those 2 words, Israeli occupation. That means my occupation. I'd read in the newspaper and heard on the radio the United Nations, the European Union is always condemning the Israeli occupation, but I had no idea where this thing could be. Because when I drive in the roads of Samaria, when I walk in the fields of Judea, I don't see occupation. I see the return of the Jewish people to our ancient homeland after 2,000 years of exile. What could be more righteous than that? We've come home to our land. And Ali's talking about being a Palestinian and fighting for the liberation of Palestine. He talks about the Nakba, the tragedy of 1948. I said to myself, what tragedy? Of the War of Independence, the greatest victory of the Jewish people after 2,000 years. And he's telling all of my history, but from the other perspective completely. And he said the first Intifada, the first Palestinian uprising, his mother was a leader giving out pamphlets and organizing strikes. He said the Israeli army came into the house in the night and beat her up. And then another time, they took her to, he said, 6 years in jail. And then he said he was taken to 10 years in Israeli jail and never told the charges against him in the secret file. I want to get up and say, Ali, you're a liar. Those things don't happen. You're making it all up. But I couldn't get up and say he's a liar because he wasn't trying to convince us of anything. He was just telling the story of his life very, very calmly. And I left that gathering undone, challenged, confused, angry. How could he say these things? And how could I ever have heard these things? I remember literally pacing back and forth, that I feel I have to bend down and pick my stomach up and put it back in. What's going on? And I felt I couldn't go on any longer. I had to figure this out. I went back to the same place that I first met Ali and Jamal and all the other people. And Ali was there. We started to talk. A week into the wee hours of the night, around the campfire, what we did is we told stories and we listened to stories. The Palestinians told us the stories of who they are, how they live, where they're coming from, what they want. And we Israeli Jews told the Palestinians the stories of who we are, of 2,000 years of exile, of homecoming. It was the hardest thing in the world to listen to each other's stories, because their stories contradict our stories, and our stories contradict their stories. So many times we wanted to run away and not come back. We wanted to get up and shout, "You're a liar, it can't be." So many times we felt we were traitors for listening. But we listened until it hurt, and it really hurt, and we listened some more. And I want to make it very clear that by and large, we did not engage in dialogue. It's not about the Palestinians telling us about themselves and us responding and saying, what about this? It's not like that. It's not responding to what they say. It's absorbing what they say. And then you talking about who you are and them not responding but absorbing and listening. You go home and you think about it. It sometimes infuriates you what they think about themselves and think about you. You just have to absorb it. It's too tense to have dialogue. It's listening and listening more until it hurts. I want to try to summarize a little bit of what we learned from 10 years of listening, of activities together. And of course, most of us in this work are transformed by listening. You become a different person. Ali, almost from off the bat, said, "It's true. What you Israeli Jews think about us Palestinians is true. We really do, by and large, go to sleep at night dreaming that the Jews will disappear tomorrow. Because we Palestinians," Ali said, "we know that you guys don't belong. You're colonial occupiers, just like the French in Algeria. And if we Palestinians fight long enough and hard enough, the Jews will get up and leave. It'll be too hard. They'll go back to where they came from." It was really, really hard for us Israeli Jews to hear that. Really hard. But you know what? We Jews had to admit that we go to sleep at night with the same dream. That the Palestinians will disappear tomorrow. Because we know they don't belong. It's our land, it's not theirs. And if we hold on strongly enough, they'll get the message. 5 years, 50 years, 100 years, they'll get up and leave because they don't belong. But what happens when you listen to the other side's stories of history and belonging, and them saying they have no other place to go, they belong here, and they hear your stories, you begin to realize that both sides are going to stay in this land forever. And then you say to yourself, wow, I've been building my whole view of reality about the past, the present, and the future upon an illusion that's never going to be. We all dream eventually we'll be here without them, but it's not going to happen. And then you have to reconfigure everything you know about reality to take into account the truth that we have to live there with them and they have to live there with us. It's really, really hard. It fries your brain and your heart. We also began to understand that most Israelis and most Palestinians construct their identities upon the nullification, the erasure of the other side's identity. Both sides think they can tell the other side who they are. You know what the Palestinians say about the Israeli Jews? They say, Jew, very nice. The Quran greatly respects Judaism, but it's religion. It's a faith. It's not a people. It's not a nation. You don't need land. So go back to Russia where you came from. And what did the Israelis say to the Palestinians? They say, Palestinian, you know you're making it up. There's no such thing as Palestinian. If it was a Palestinian state, you're just Arabs. So go back to Saudi Arabia where you came from. Why did you come to take our land? But after you listen to the stories of the other side again and again and again, you hear the same thing from different people, you begin to realize They really think they belong here. And they're not going anywhere. And I realize that I don't know anything about who they are. I can't tell them who they are. I have to listen and let them tell who they are, and they may listen when I tell who I am. And we learned that there's such a thing as the Palestinian people. Corollary of that, there's such a thing as the Jewish people. Number two, there's such a thing as the land of Palestine. Corollary to that, there's such a thing as the land of Israel. Number three, the Palestinian people belong to the land of Palestine. Corollary of that, the Jewish people belong to the land of Israel. And now the most difficult, excruciating conclusion to those 3 points. The land of Palestine and the land of Israel, historically speaking, have the exact same borders. From the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea is all historical Palestine. And from that very same Jordan River that you can see on the map, and that very same Mediterranean is historically the land of Israel. The two peoples belong to the same land. That holy land, that Mother Earth, has given birth to 2 children, the Palestinian children and the Jewish Israeli children. We're siblings of the same mother, and we're destined to live there together. Ali Abu Awwad, our Palestinian founder, sums it up very simply. We have to find a way to fit 2 truths into one heart. We have to find a way to fit 2 truths into one heart in order for 2 peoples to live in one land. Another way of saying the same thing is that you don't have to be wrong for me to be right. We Jews and we Palestinians spend a lot of energy proving that the other side is wrong, out of a sense that it's a zero-sum game. They have to be wrong so I could be right. But the truth is that they don't have to be wrong for me to be right. They can be right and I can be right. There are 2 truths. And in the end, I'm a Jew, and I'm a Zionist, and I'm a settler. I'm deeply connected to that land, to my heritage. But my identity doesn't have to come at the expense of the other side. I can also absorb into myself the humanity and the identity and the belonging in and to the land of the Palestinian people, and that doesn't make me less of who I am. I don't have to be afraid of admitting the truth on the other side, admitting the legitimacy on the other side. It's about recognition, recognizing the other side for who they know themselves to be, and vice versa. I'm going to sum up. We have that are making this conflict worse to blow up in our faces. We have to deal with those beliefs and put them on the table and find a way to reinterpret them. And the same thing on the Islamic side. There are many, many beliefs, and I can list them for you, that are fueling this conflict, and we have to find a way to reinterpret that part of Islam to make it conducive to peace and reconciliation. And that's why interfaith dialogue between people who believe in Judaism and people who believe in Islam is a central part of the work that we do. There's no other way. We have to bring these people to the table, and that's what we're doing. And the third point is settlements. Roots works with settlements. So we recognize the historical connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel, the whole land of Israel from the river to the sea, and we affirm the theoretical right of the Jewish people to live in the whole land. And at the same time, Roots upholds the principles of Palestinian freedom, of equality and self-determination, and we're against any Jewish settlement that undermines those principles. And unfortunately today, just about all Jewish settlement in the West Bank undermines those principles. My living in the land that I belong to, today is coming at the expense of the Palestinian people, and I can't have that anymore. We in Roots are working for a just, equitable solution. A corollary of what I just said is occupation. Many Israelis and many Palestinians argue. The Israelis say there's no occupation. The Palestinians say there is occupation. We in Roots believe the answer is actually very simple. You can argue on a legal level if the land is occupied. A lot of Israelis say the land is not occupied, our historical homeland, how can we occupy it? The Palestinians say the land is occupied. We can argue about that, but we cannot argue about the fact that the Palestinian people are occupied. The Palestinian people live under military occupation, my nation's military occupation, and I can have anything to do with that anymore. That is unjust. You don't have to live in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria to support roots. You don't have to be religious to support roots. You don't have to support settlements to support roots. But you do have to understand, without recognizing the Jewish connection to the whole land and without engaging religious settlers like me and religion, there'll be no solution. You have to bring the problem to the forefront. I'm going to close my words by saying that in Roots, we believe that we are preparing the human groundwork, the human hearts and the human minds for a future political peace settlement of dignity, of equality, of freedom, human rights, security, and peace for both sides in that little sliver of land that we both call home. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope you're still ready for another story. I promise this one will be easier and shorter. My name is Noor, Awad. I live in Bethlehem, south of Jerusalem. I live there, but I was not born there. I was born actually in Amman, Jordan. I have nothing to do with Jordan except that I was born there. My family are originally from Jerusalem area. My family, I mean my grandparents, they used to live in a village southwest of Jerusalem called Malha. And if anyone is familiar with the area of Malha, you might know the place I'm talking about. It's where the first shopping center, the shopping mall actually in Malha was built in 1972. It's until today, it's still called Kinyan Malha. So that's where the village of my family, that's where my ancestors have lived until 1948. My grandparents were born there, they grew up there, they got married there. Some of my uncles were born there until 1948. In April 1948, the neighboring village of Malha, or one of the neighboring villages of Malha, was called Deir Yassin. And in Deir Yassin, there was a brutal attack, a brutal massacre that took place, where about 100 people were killed by the Jewish forces. So after that massacre, the people of my village were afraid that we are going to be attacked next, or after that attack. So some of the people of my village start to move away to a refugee camp that the United Nations have just established outside of the city of Bethlehem. Some of my family moved, some of them stayed in the village, but after June 1948, it became harder, and then in July, the village was conquered by the Jewish side. Now, all of my family are in the refugee camp in 1948. My grandparents are thinking this will be a matter of a short time. Hopefully, there will be a few weeks, the war will stop, there will be a ceasefire, and then we will go back to our home, to our village. That's not really far away, it's just a few miles away. That's what my grandparents were thinking. And then they stayed in the refugee camp for a year and a half. And by the end of the war, when the ceasefire happened, now they realized they are not allowed to go back because Malha became part of west of Jerusalem, in where no Palestinian is allowed to go back. And where they live in the area that became called the West Bank, or the area we call it the West Bank, they are living now under Jordanian occupation. My parents grew up in Bethlehem. They were born in Bethlehem, and they grew up there. And after 1967, they found themselves living under the Israeli occupation. And at some point, my father gave up. He said, I have no future here. I have no hope for me to live ever a normal life in my country, so I'm moving. His plan actually wasn't to go to Jordan. His plan was to go to Europe, but he stayed in Jordan for a while. My mother also moved there. They lived in Amman for a few years. They got married, and that's how I was born there. But in 1995, something different happened in this story. In 1995, we were in the middle of the Oslo peace process, and for the first time, after many decades of wars and fighting and being refugees, now the Israeli leadership and the Palestinian leadership are engaged in peace talks, and they are talking about ending the conflict, ending the occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, and soon there will be a Palestinian state. That gave a lot of hope to my family. It gave hope for my parents, and they started to consider that now we should come back. We should go back because we can start a new life again in our country and not living under occupation or under army, but we can live our life freely and to the beach, and we will go to Jaffa. Sometimes we go to Akka up north. So that's what I remember. But I'm not saying to you that those 5 years between 1995 and 2000 were like, it was so peaceful that the conflict just ended, the occupation is gone, and we are living a peaceful life. I was too young to understand the complexity of the situation and what's happening around me. Of course, there was violence, and the situation started to escalate as long as the diplomatic process is actually not really working. And in the year 2000, it failed, and there we came to a dead end. That left the people with a lot of frustration, my people, a lot of frustration on the ground, that we did not end the occupation, we did not come to an end of the occupation. And as a result, the second intifada, the second uprising started. Now, the next 5 years of my life will be actually a very violent chapter of my life and in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The second intifada was a very dangerous time. It was a time when Israeli military, Israeli soldiers would come in. For example, where I lived in Bethlehem, there was assassination. The city was under a heavy siege. This is the time when the bomb suiciding attacks were going to Israel and buses are blowing up, and my father is there in Jerusalem. So it was a very dangerous time, and I was old enough to understand that I'm living actually in almost like an active war zone. Because where I lived, even in our house, there was shooting at night between the area where the settlement is next to our house, and there's an Israeli military base, and there's also another base for Palestinian security, and they are shooting at each other, and we are in the middle of a crossfire. So that's now the reality that I'm living. That's the reality I'm growing up with. And of course, I start to think about it. Why I'm living this situation? This is not a normal situation. And I'm old enough also to understand that many people around the world, many people like my age, don't have to live under these circumstances. So why I live this situation? And immediately the answer was, it's because of who I am, where I live. It means because of my identity, because I'm a Palestinian and I live in Palestine, I have inherited this situation. And it felt like a curse. It's something that goes with the generation in my family. With my grandparents who became refugees in the war of 48 in the Nakba, and then my parents were born under occupation and refugee camps and moving from one place to another, and now it's my turn. I'm the third generation of this story of suffering. And I didn't want to be that. So at the age of 15 years old, I start to think that the rational way, or the best way for me, is to just get out of there, run away. You don't have to live under these circumstances. You don't have to spend all of your life this way. So maybe you should move to another country and start a new life somewhere else, far away from what's happening there. And that's what I wanted to do. But to be honest with you, that's not the only idea in my mind back then, because I am not easily satisfied with the idea that there is nothing I can do. Because I do go back to the question, the situation is bad, but there must be something we can do about it. And when I use the word we, I'm talking about my generation. I'm not just talking about my people, I'm talking specifically about my generation, about people my age. We did not create the situation, we did not choose it, we were born and we found this situation. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, but we have to do something about it. Because if everyone thinks like me, that there's nothing I can do and I just should run away, then who's going to stay? Who's going to do anything to make sure that the life will be better for the future generations? So it's true that I can actually get out and think about myself and run away, but at the same time, I would still feel that I have abandoned a certain responsibility. And it's my generation responsibility. Okay, so now what to do? It's a big situation. It's maybe complicated. But for us, the people who live in the ground, it's not really so complicated. I want to get you in the mind of a Palestinian born and living in the West Bank. When you live in the West Bank, it doesn't take you a long time to understand that the number one reason that our life there is abnormal, and sometimes we are prohibited from our national rights, or many times we are prohibited from our national rights, and sometimes human basic rights, is because of the reality of occupation, that we are living under the control of another nation. We are living under the control of not our own people, but another people. And that should end. which means that the occupation should end. So we should be resisting the occupation. That's how I understand my responsibility. My responsibility is to go out there and resist the occupation. But what does it mean? Well, resistance of the occupation, in my reality, mostly goes with violence. There is people who talk about nonviolence. There are people who are doing nonviolent resistance. I don't want to undermine that, but like when the people think of resisting of occupation, the first thing they think about is violence, because they are thinking about the most effective way. If the occupation is losing, if it's hard for them to control us, then they will have no other they have no other option but to end their occupation on us. So that's what we do. That's how we go. And that means that I might get myself killed when I go and I want to resist the occupation. But at some point, I have to think about it, and I have to make the decision that I'm willing to pay the price for the freedom and dignity for my people and the future generations. This is what it takes. So that's the reality I grew up with. That's my background. This is who I am. And I want to add more. I will tell you two more stories, actually, how I came to Roots. In 2013, it was my first time ever to be able to go to Jerusalem. So I live in Bethlehem. Jerusalem is 20 minutes away. And from the year 2000, from the Second Intifada, until 2013, I could not just travel to Jerusalem. I couldn't go, because there is a checkpoint, and I'm not allowed to go unless I have a permission from the Israeli army. Why I'm saying this to you? Because for 13 years, I couldn't really see the other side except as soldiers. So the first time I actually got a permission, I remember, and I was going to Jerusalem, it felt like I'm going to another country, and I'm seeing those Israelis who are not soldiers as a people, but it's not really, there is no way to connect to them. And I start to realize that there is other people on the other side of the wall who are human beings, but it wasn't, I would say, the full experience yet, because I see those people, I cannot talk to them, I cannot interact, I'm afraid of them. I don't know if they are afraid of me. That's something that I had to learn about later, but that's one story. Now, the second story is, in 2016, I was hired to guide a group of American students. Why I was doing that? Because I'm a tour guide. Back in my home, that's my job. I'm a tour guide. I live in Bethlehem. I mostly guide in the West Bank. I can't guide in Jerusalem because part of the restrictions we are living under is that, of course, we cannot go to Jerusalem, let alone to be a guide in Jerusalem or in Tel Aviv or somewhere else. So I started guiding in Bethlehem and in the West Bank area in 2014, and in 2016, I got this group. And the reason why I also started doing the tours as well is that for me, many times living in Bethlehem, I would meet internationals who came on a trip to the region and probably have heard or met someone on the Israeli side. So they are more familiar with the Israeli perspective on the conflict. But they did not meet any Palestinian. And even if they did meet, in many cases, they didn't really hear about the Palestinian side of the story. So I found myself there telling and explaining about the Palestinian perspective and about the Palestinian history. And so I want to do it as a way of also resistance by spreading awareness about what the occupation means and what we are living. So I have this group now. It's, I think it was in April 2016, around that time. The group actually are coming mostly from they are studying like political science. They're coming from, this is their background, and they are focusing on the Middle East, studying the Israeli-Palestinian conflict closely. And they took this trip for almost 2 weeks to come to the region and visit both sides. Their program was divided that mostly on the first week, they will see and hear from the Israeli side. And on the second week, they will come to the West Bank to hear and see from the Palestinian side. And they meet people who are representative of civil society. They will meet also representative of governments, politicians on both sides sometimes. Now, I am one of many tour guides who guided this group. I wasn't with them the whole time, so I'm with them only for 1 day. And my job was to take them to the city of Hebron. I followed them as well. By the end of that day, you can now say that the group have a better knowledge about what does it mean to live as a Palestinian under occupation. Before we finish that day and we finish that visit and go back to Bethlehem, we still have one more meeting. And that meeting was with an Israeli who lives in Hebron, with an Israeli settler. Now that was so strange, actually. There was never on my tour that I would take my group to meet with Israelis, let alone to meet with an Israeli settler. Actually, I did not opposed or objected the idea. I said, okay, I took the group, I showed them the reality, and if this is what they want, they also wanted to meet a settler, so let it be. Now, I thought how we are going to do it, because I'm not allowed to enter the settlement, and so he will not come out. So how we are going to do that? I thought eventually that I will bring the group to the checkpoint at the entrance of the settlement. I will have to hand over the group to him, and then I will wait outside somewhere in one of the Palestinian stores or shops until the group finishes, and after 1 hour and a half, the group comes back, and that's how it will go. But he suggested that I should join, and I should be part of this meeting, and I should listen to what the things that he will say. And now me and him are starting to looking for a place where I and the Israeli settler and the group can all sit together in the old city of Hebron. There is no place like this. Eventually, he suggested that we go to the tomb of the patriarchs. It's a very important place there, the Ibrahim Mosque, Mosque of Abraham, and we go to the Jewish side. But the place is actually divided today into a Jewish and a Muslim side, and where I'm allowed on the Palestinian Muslim side, but I'm not allowed to go to the Jewish side because there is a checkpoint there, and the soldiers will stop me if they know who I am. So he suggested that he will walk in front of us, in front of the group. He pretend he's the guide, and I will walk in the middle between the people, and the soldiers will not see me. And we did it, and it worked. The soldiers did not see me. That's how I went on the other side, and it was my first time and the only time on the Jewish side of the tomb of the patriarchs. We sat there, and then he began to talk to us. And very similar to what I am doing and what Rabbi Hanan did, he was telling us the story of his life. He began by explaining to us that he was born here in the US. And he grew up as an American Jewish citizen with a wonderful life, with a very good life, actually. That's what he said. And he made sure to explain to us that when he decided to leave the US, and it was not one of the reasons, none of the reasons was about anti-Semitism or that his life became hard here or difficult as a Jewish person. But actually the main reason why he left is that because he believed as a Jewish person he should be living on the land of Israel. That's how he's fulfilling his Jewish identity. So I'm sitting there, the only Palestinian among the group, and I understand. I thought this is the thing that we agree on. Because I thought, this is not about your perspective, it's about legal and political facts. Like, we live under Israeli military control, we are not citizens of Israel, we cannot become citizens of Israel, and the Palestinian Authority is there, but it's not independent state, so how come you can say that? How come you can say there is no occupation? I really didn't understood how could he say that? And then the second thing he said, there is no Palestinian people. There is no Palestinian people. And now the group start to wonder, so if there is no occupation and if there is no Palestinian people, then why is there a conflict? And to me, that was not strange that actually he said that, because I grew up in my education as a Palestinian, and my learning and my understanding of who's the other side. I always learned, the Zionist movement from the beginning, the Zionist people have denied our existence, our mere existence. They said to the Jewish people in Europe, a land without people for a people without land. And by the way, the source of that idea wasn't Jewish originally, but I wasn't surprised because I knew they were denying us. But you know what? After I listened to him, after half an hour listening to him telling his story, I felt I'm being very denied on every level. I'm denied on my identity level, and I'm denied by the circumstances that I live under that has to do also with how I grew up and how I live my life. So if everything that I know about myself is being denied, I felt like I don't exist. And I felt so frustrated listening to him, like really, really frustrated. And then he said something that was happening at that time, and then we start to argue about it. And that was the end of our meeting. I took my group on the way back to Bethlehem. Now, on the way back, I remember myself realizing that this person, this Israeli settler I met in Hebron, was the first Israeli that I ever met. Now, someone can say, how? You live there. How that Israeli settler was the first Israeli? Because I realized that the only Israelis I met until then were the Israeli soldiers. The soldiers who stop us at the checkpoint, the soldiers who come to Bethlehem at night to arrest people. Those are the Israelis that I meet. And of course, we don't talk to the soldiers. We don't have conversation. It's not any peaceful relation there. So on the way back, when I realized this, I said he was the first Israeli and the last one. I don't want to meet any one of them again. I didn't know that I'm going to meet the second Israeli on the same day. On the way back to Bethlehem, I was still have to take my group to one last meeting, and that meeting was at Roots, at Judur Shurashim, the same organization I'm part of today. I didn't really understood what was happening. I thought we are meeting with another settler from Gush Etzion, and that was Rabbi Hanan. I then realized that there's a project there, and there are Palestinians involved. So I picked up my phone, and I called Saeed, who was arranging this group with me, and I actually just want to clarify from Saeed, and I asked him, what's happening? What is this Roots? Why there are Palestinians there? What's happening? And then he said, Roots is Palestinians and Israelis coming together. And I said, what they are talking about? And he said, they are talking about peace. That sounded like the most suspicious, the most ridiculous, and the most dangerous thing that I can hear in my context, in my reality. I said, what? And I didn't want to go there because I was looking forward to meet with the Israelis in the movement or in the organization. I wanted to go and meet those Palestinians who are allowing themselves to do that. I wanted to meet Ali, but I didn't know who Ali was, and he wasn't there that day. We arrived at this place, at this farmland, and Rabbi Hanan received us there. And it was a bit strange that there is an Israeli settler receiving us in a Palestinian land, in Area C. That's not something familiar. Now we enter and we sat, and then Rabbi Hanan gave us similar presentation to the one that he gave you tonight. And at the beginning, I was listening to him talking about himself, describing himself as a Jewish, as a settler, and as a Zionist. And the more he talked about himself and described his connection to the land, the more I say to myself, so what's the difference from the first settler? There's another American person here who have a Jewish religion, who happened to be Jewish, and he's now trying to convince me that he left his country, he left the US here and moved to my land because this is his land. And at some point, I got again frustrated. And I said, you know what? I should leave. What I mean, because we are a group, we have a bus driver, right? And the bus driver is outside. He's sitting alone waiting for us. So I said I should maybe join him, just take a break from all of this. It's the end of the day. There's nothing here I need to listen to. And that's what I wanted to do. But I didn't do that for a number of reasons. But one of them, I was telling myself, honestly, that maybe this person, maybe Rabbi Hanan, can say something about the reality, about what's actually happening, about the conflict, about the occupation. And then Rabbi Hanan started to tell us these stories, one after another, about him realizing that there's another people in this land, that we have another name, that we have a different name, that we have a story, that we have a history, that we live under certain circumstances. By the end of his talk, the group was very confused. The group that I brought was very confused. And they shared this confusion, not with him, but they shared it with me on the bus. I'm their guide. They told me, what do you think? He's a settler, but talks about the occupation. He's a proud Zionist, but talks about the catastrophe in 1948. How could it be that he brings the two things together? I didn't feel confused like them, and I understand why they felt confused, but I remember leaving Roots that day after I meet with Rabbi Hanan, feeling two things strongly. I felt being recognized, and also I felt empathy, being empathized with. It was something unexpected to me that I will meet someone on the other side who have the ability to recognize me and my people and our story and be able to empathize with us. And because of that, I could not ignore it. I start to think about the things that he said about himself and about my side, about his side and about my side. And the more I think about it, the more I feel I should go back and meet him again. Now, it's true that at that moment I could fight it. I could say to myself, you know what, this person that you met, Rabbi Hanan, was nice, but he's a phenomenon, maybe he's not representative of his people. Of course, not all of the people on his side think this way. They are all thinking like the first settler you met. But I didn't really try to fight it because I was so excited that I met someone on the other side, someone from the enemy who I can see as a partner, who I can talk with. And that's why, actually, after we exchanged phone number, Rabbi Hanan made sure to meet me again. And he came close to Bethlehem. We met somewhere in Beit Jala. And then we had some talks. And then I went to Roots. And I met with Ali. I met with Shaul. I met with Hadassah. I met with Khalid. And after I met with several of the people there, several activists, and heard more and more from their stories. And I remember, I made sure at the beginning not to talk, but to listen. I really listened to other stories and to other experiences. And at the end, I found myself joining this initiative. And now I want to tell you, why did I join Roots? The main reason why I joined Roots has to do with something in my story. In my story, I was talking about the struggle, the dilemma that someone lives as a Palestinian, especially in this generation, that we live under occupation and we have to fight it, and I see that's my responsibility. But the moment that I learn that there are ways that we can fight this reality together and create a better one, that changes a lot to me. What we do is not just about coexistence, it's also about reconciliation, but also it's about co-resistance. We are together co-resisting this reality to create a better future for next generation, for our people who are living on the land. So that's one of the reasons why I joined Roots. At Roots, I got the chance to meet more and more Israelis. And then I went through this process that I considered that I was changed. But the way I was changed, actually, Rabbi Hanan said it very beautifully at the end of his story. It's not that I forget my identity and I give up on it. No. But I want to live my identity in a way that doesn't blind me from seeing other identities and seeing other people connected to the same land. This is who we are. That's what we are trying to achieve. We are a people-to-people organization. We focus a lot on working among the people on the ground. Like Rabbi Hanan said, we are working mostly in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, even though we sometimes have actually collaboration with other organizations over the Green Line or in Jerusalem, but our focus is very local in our area. And the last thing I will say, the work of reconciliation that we are doing is very important. It was very important before the 7th of October, and it will continue to be important after the 7th of October. But this work can be much more effective if we also work on the political level. I mean that the work of reconciliation and the work on the ground is not alone enough. We have to have also a work on the top. We have to work on the political level as well. And I also try to do that. So thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward for your questions, but I think now there will be the second video that we want to show you, so you can, the place that we created and the place that we...
My name is Shaul, I live in Tekoa.
Hi, I'm Bilal, I'm from Petumba.
My name is Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger, and I live in Alon Shvut.
4 years ago, here in our family land, Roots start. Roots is a partnership between people from both sides, people who believe in non-violence, dignity and quality between our people. Dignity for me is when you respect the other one, when you give him the space for his life, when you respect his opinion, his culture. This is the dignity, and it's very important for us, the Middle East people. We try here to give another picture to the people in order to increase the hope inside them.
We work in many different directions, but one of the core things that happens here is the people-to-people work.
Years ago, nobody could imagine a space where Israeli and Palestinian youth from the West Bank could meet each other and work together on building a better future. This cannot happen without friendship, without love for each other, and to have fun together.
In all of my life, before I come to youth group, I only went once to Israel or to beach. It was very emotional to go with each other because I never imagined that I would go to beach with an Israelis, you know.
All of these programs engage with our local communities, bringing people who are a little bit afraid to come and came for the first time and then saw something that surprised them and became involved.
אנחנו פה עומדים כולנו בכאב גדול, והשאלה איך גורמים לזה שזה לא יהיה עוד פעם ולא נעמוד פה באותו בכי.
It was so important when Roots went to Etzion Junction, to protest against the violence in Douma. And both Palestinians and Israelis should condemn violence and should stand with each other against violence and should show the people, the world, and also the extremists on both sides that there are Palestinians who are against violence and they are protesting and they are saying no violence in my name, and also Israelis who are saying the same thing.
We expand our circles in many ways. I travel and speak all over Israel, in the radio, in the television, and a lot of meeting with young people. People are thirsty to hear what we are doing. They don't believe the dream of peace can become real.
Roots Network today includes representatives from 28 different Israeli and Palestinian towns in this area, this local area.
Roots has created a miracle, an expanding island of sanity, a veritable Garden of Eden, in a land full with so much ignorance of the other, prejudice, stereotypes, and fear. We are beginning to bring a little bit of healing, deep recognition of the others belonging to this land, preparing the ground for a future of coexistence, human rights, dignity, and mutual recognition. We need your help. We ask you to join us and join the thousands of people around the globe who are supporting Roots. Instead of exporting the Palestinian-Israeli conflict to the four corners of the globe, help us to export recognition and respect. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I think I shouldn't have moved that. My name is Andy Blanche, and I'm going to be reading the questions today. I first went to Israel and Palestine with a group of people shortly after the Second Intifada started. As Noor said, it was a time of great violence and great uncertainty. We had the opportunity to meet with a number of simply amazing peacemakers while we were there. And we were so blown away by their wisdom, their courage, and their integrity that by the time we got home, the group had decided we just had to do something. So we actually created a nonprofit organization called the Center for Religious Tolerance with the sole purpose to figure out how to help the folks that we had met who obviously had part of the answer. We tend to think a lot and talk a lot about the political stuff that's going on. That's where the attention gets pulled. And as Noor pointed out, that's a piece of it we can't ignore. But what we felt then in 1999 and 2000, and what I feel again tonight listening to these two incredible hearts, was a sense of hope You know, that as hopeless as this whole situation seems sometimes, when you listen to what these folks are doing, and you feel the empathy that's radiating from them, you start to feel like maybe there is hope. Maybe we can do something about this. So I hope that tonight, not only are we all moved, which I'm sure we are, because I'm almost in tears, having this feeling again after quite a long time, I hope we can actually come up with some actionable thoughts about what we can do to keep this energy moving and growing. So with that, I'm going to start with the questions. The first question is occupation. No occupation from 48 to 67. Six-day war, again, attempts to destroy Israel. Israel changed that. Why not work for a Palestinian state? Okay. So I guess that's really the question. The history kind of sets the context. Should we be working for a Palestinian state?
Is this working? No, this is not working. Now it's working. Yeah. To clarify something, when we talk about the occupation, or when I talk about the occupation, I don't necessarily mean that the whole conflict is just centered around the occupation that started in 1967. No, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is older than that. It started in 1948 and it started before 1948. But if you want to live as a Palestinian in the West Bank right now, 1967 was 54 years ago. For this generation, they don't feel like they are living, my generation doesn't feel like we are living in a conflict between two countries, two armies, fighting each other. If I would go to my neighbors and people my age, and I describe the situation that's happening, conflict, they will not know what I'm talking about. Because everyday experience is not a conflict, it's occupation. But I do use the word also conflict to refer to the situation, because I do recognize that it has older roots, or it has started before, way before 1967. Now, just like clarify something, before 1967, we were under Jordanian occupation. Why I use this word? Because the Jordanians, and that was very clear, they didn't want to have a Palestinian state. The Jordanians, until 1967 at least, were interested to keep the West Bank and Jerusalem mostly under their control. So it's part of not allowing the Palestinian state also has to do with the surrounding Arab countries and their attitude toward the Palestinians. That's one thing. And the other thing is that the Palestinian national movement itself wasn't yet thinking that we should only establish a Palestinian state on part of the land. We were thinking that we should get back our land. That's what people were thinking, because 60% of the nation, of our nation, of my nation, on the course of almost 2 years, between the end of 1946 until the end of 1949, became refugees. Actually, I will tell you another fact, that in the beginning of the 1950s, half of the Jordanian jails, the jails in Jordan, were full of Palestinian prisoners who breached the ceasefire line with Israel and went back to their lands against the agreements between the Jordanian government and the Israeli government. Jordan was arresting people for just trying to go check on their houses, because not all of the villages that the people left, Israel have actually occupied or put people there, for example. People were going to check on their houses, going to check on their lands. In many cases, some people got killed, some people got arrested. So why I'm saying this, I just want to say that we have also suffered from the oppression of the Jordanians as well. It's not just all on the Israeli side, and also our national movement wasn't thinking to have a two-state solution in the 50s and the 60s until the Oslo peace process. That's, I think, part of the question. I don't know if that.
Briefly, yes, we should and we are working against occupation. And yes, we should and we are preparing the groundwork for a future Palestinian state. However, it should be clear that in the eyes of Roots, that's not enough. Ending the occupation and creating a Palestinian state is not enough. It can't just be a political change. There has to be a change in the attitude of Israelis and Palestinians. Specifically, Israelis have to recognize that the Palestinians are a people that deserve a state and that are connected to the land. It's not just we're going to give it to them out of political expediency. We Israelis have to accept, I believe, we have to recognize the Palestinians for who they are. And, no less important, the Palestinians have to recognize the Jewish people for what we are, a people that also deserves its own sovereignty. In other words, there has to be mutual recognition, not just on the political level, but on the grassroots level.
The next two questions, I'm going to read them both because they're related, and I suspect this issue is on most of our minds and weighing on our hearts. How have the events of the last month in Gaza affected your relationship and your work together, and your positions with regard to both Hamas and the Israelis? And then, corollary to that, how have things changed in the West Bank in general since October 7th?
Great. So let's put on the table what's happened in the very practical sense in the West Bank. Israel, the Israeli government, the Israeli army, has been, beginning October 7th, afraid that Palestinians in the West Bank would arise against Israel, would heed the call of Hamas and join the fight against Israel. And for that reason, Israel put all the Palestinian villages and cities and towns in the West Bank under siege, under military closure, which is in place until now. What that means is that for over 4 months, the vast, vast majority of Palestinians have not been able to move from village to village, city to city. No Palestinians have been allowed to go back to their work in Israel. That's over 100,000, right? Palestinians worked in Israel. And another tens of thousands worked in settlements. All that's ended. So, and even Palestinians who didn't work in Israel or in settlements, who just worked in a neighboring town, can't go to work. So for 4 months, there's been a great lessening of economic activity. That means people are becoming more and more desperate. Many Palestinians in the West Bank, I'm not talking about Gaza, have nothing to eat right now. How does that affect our work? Again, I'm still talking now on the physical logistic level. It means that our Dignity Center, Palestinians cannot come to it because they can't travel. So we've done almost nothing at the Dignity Center since October 7th. We had a one staff meeting just before Noor and I left for the US a week and a half ago. It was the first time we've had a meeting of Israelis and Palestinians at the Dignity Center. It wasn't easy for the Palestinians to get there. In addition, we usually at Roots have every week 3 or 4 Israeli programs from around the country, pre-military academies, gap year programs of Israelis or high school or college kids coming to visit our center. That has stopped completely. We've only had 4 or 5 of those since October 7th, most of them in the past month. We also are used to hosting 3 or 4 groups from around the world, mostly from the US, at our Dignity Center every week. That also has stopped. We've only had 2 groups from the US over the past 4 months. But of course it goes deeper. Everything I said now is just logistics. Even if Palestinians today were allowed by the Israeli military authorities to come to the Dignity Center, I think most wouldn't. And Israelis wouldn't. Because both sides, since October 7th, are living in a heightened sense of fear and trauma and tribal emotions have circled the wagon. Even people who were on the way to becoming peacemakers before October 7th today are afraid or resentful of the other side, even more than they were in the past, and are not able to meet. And the truth is, we in the Roots leadership, we have a certain fear of allowing the two sides to meet, because who knows if one person from this side will say something that will explode the room. There's so much emotion now. So what have we been doing since October 7th? A lot of leadership meetings on Zoom of Israeli and Palestinian staff, a lot of Zoom meetings of each side separately to try and process feelings. A few, not a lot of Zoom meetings of both sides together. Very difficult over Zoom to deal with the different languages and translation and the emotions. What we have been doing for the past month is Zoom meetings of one side with a representative, just one or two from the other side. In other words, one Palestinian talking to 60 Israelis, or one Israeli talking to 50, 60, 70 Palestinians on Zoom. And when you pick the right people to talk to the other side, it's a little bit easier to make sure that things are said that won't, again, explode the room. You have to find people to talk that are able to explain their side to the other side in language the other side can understand. I don't know if I said everything, so...
Yeah, I just want to add, I mean, there's a lot happened, and even like the relationship, not just at Roots, by the way, in many organizations, our stand on violence and the sides that does violence. Rabbi Hanan actually explained it very well, like how each side had this like tribal feelings and emotions that my people are being attacked, I am being attacked, and people are justifying the violence that's done on their side. Now, Roots for sure firmly stands against violence. We don't support violence, but I will say another important thing is that some of us on the Palestinian and the Israeli side, we felt, some governments started to talk about the day after, and that there's maybe no strategy to end this war. What's going to happen in Gaza after, what's going, and it seems to many of us that so far there's nothing yet I can really talk about out there, nothing serious. There are some rumors and some news about some things, and going back to the old two-state solution that was talked about, and there is no one including in this whole process, in the discussion of the day after, the civil society, those Israelis and Palestinian peacemakers who have been learning from the mistakes of the past for the last 20, almost 30 years. One of the groups that I'm connected to personally, other than Roots, is called A Land for All. A Land for All. And they basically work on a political level, where they have a proposal of two states, but the two states are also part of one confederation. So it's not exactly like the US system here, it's not a federal government, it's a confederation like mostly the European Union, where the two states are totally independent, but they have shared economy, open borders, and joint security between them. That will allow a more practical solutions to the issues of settlers, Jerusalem, the borders. They have their own proposal, right? So, but they are not being part of any, like the governments are not really inviting them or discussing with those Palestinian and Israeli activists to put them as part of the discourse for the day after, the war. Luckily, this group I mentioned was more and more active, and they managed to made some important meetings with representatives of the European Union, from the European Parliament, and from like top representatives of the European Union, to just take this model or this proposal as a better alternative to the classic two separate states.
This is important, I think, for things happening not just by us in Israel-Palestine, important for things happening in America. So I want to add, we found after October 7th that many Israelis, even Israeli peace activists, and many Palestinians, even Palestinian peace activists, were unable to talk to the other side for the following reason. That each side do condemn the Hamas massacre, but I cannot condemn it without a rider. And the rider is, the massacre is wrong and immoral, but it had a context. It didn't come out of nowhere. There was a reason for it. They were fighting, the Palestinians, for freedom, to get out of their open-air prison that is Gaza. I'm just putting things on the table. And
okay, we need to we need to be respectful of everybody here, and if you, pardon? Okay.
Okay,
so we can't be having.
I'm telling you what people said.
Okay, there's some very high emotions here right now.
I'm in the middle. So Palestinians, by and large, could not say what the Israelis needed them to hear. And on the other side, Palestinians said to Israelis, we can't talk to you unless you condemn the Israeli attack on Gaza. Palestinians said, you're killing our people, how can we talk to you?
So, oh dear. Please, can we take a deep breath? Take a deep breath.
So guys,
please, can we take turns here?
Guys, we're the same people. So we are sharing our experiences. We are sharing what we have been going through. We are sharing what we are listening from people on both sides, people who have been worked with. We say our personal opinions. Those are personal opinions. We are not trying to enforce any opinion on you. And we are not discussing what exactly happened or what did not happen on the 7th of October. We are describing how we were affected as a community, as people who work in organizations, how we were affected by that. My partner, Rabbi Hanan, was explaining how the emotions on both sides became very strong and that people were setting preconditions that I cannot talk to you unless you say 1, 2, 3. And we are not discussing who's right and who's wrong. We are discussing the challenges that we are facing and we are dealing with.
I think we're just gonna end.
Guys, I want you to know, I want you to know, okay, I would love, I'm not sure if it's actually possible, but to talk about what happened and to have dialogue. Actually, we pointed out that right now it's very difficult for us even to bring Palestinians and Israelis to the room to talk about what's happening right now. I'll tell you even more. To me personally, to come on this speaking tour, I've said to Rabbi Hanan, and Rabbi Hanan is like really a great teacher to me. I learned a lot from him through all of these years that I have known him. I'm coming with so mixed feelings. Like with the same time what happens in Gaza, it pains me a lot. It pains me what happens to the people. I think that at the beginning, we didn't of course mention all because the time is also short. When the attack happened, for us, the Palestinians, in the organizations even, it was surprising. For many of us, even they used the word shocking. They said, I was shocked. But I will say, to some level, for us, realistically, it was expected. Meaning that the situation was boiling. The situation, and that is not said as a justification. We were expecting that if we don't solve this problem, if we don't resolve it, it will only get worse. Now, why I'm saying that? Because I want to say that we have to work together as Palestinians and Israelis on this. We have to resolve it at the end of the day. And that's why I came on this tour to talk to the people, to continue to empower my organization and to empower people on the ground. On the 8th of October, we were working on making a statement. And that statement for me, that's me, Noor represents me, says the following. We demand the release of the hostages with no conditions. And we demand the stop of violence. We demand to stop using violence because we have learned from all of these stories that we have shared and the stories of other people that I have learned that violence is not going to be the solution. No matter how much the Palestinians or the Israelis convince that the violence is going to make achievement for us. I told you in the middle of my story, I was ready to go to lose my life for the violence because I thought that will bring the freedom of my people. I don't think this anymore. I don't think that if I'm dead, that's good for my people. I think I should be alive and working for the best of my people and the best of the Israeli people as well, because we are both living on this land and our destiny is shared on the land. That's something that we have to learn. It's unfortunate that people still on both sides think the violence, or many people sometimes think the violence is the way. The violence is not the way. We should stop the violence on both sides. So to me, there was to release the hostages, to stop the violence, the ceasefire. Those are the things that need to be done. Yeah.
Okay, we are now going to wrap it up. Rabbi, can you take 3 to 5 minutes to wrap us up, please? We all are full of pain about this situation and really appreciate people doing your best to allow the rabbi to wrap up. You got 3 minutes.
Let's show the next slide. Many times people ask the question, what can you do? And actually you brought that up also. Those who want to take a picture of some of these slides, we have about 6 slides of suggestions we have of what you can do. Let's see, what do we have there? Of course, look at our website, friendsofroots.net. Friendsofroots.net. On Facebook, we're Friends of Roots. On Instagram, we are
Roots_Israel-Palestine.
Roots_Israel-Palestine. To learn about the work that we're doing. Let's go to the next slide. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, it's there. Let's go to the next slide. Of course, we need your money, and after that, we need more of your money. Without your money, the work will not continue. I hope that's obvious. You can make a donation to the website. You can invite us to speak in synagogues, churches, mosques, universities. By the way, this month-long tour of ours, we're going to 40 different places during the course of 30 weeks. We're gratified that there's been an outpouring of support for Roots since the beginning of the war. Let's go more. The next tour, by the way, September 4th to the 22nd, if you want to invite us back. The next slide. We also do Zoom presentations for synagogues and churches and mosques and universities around the world. You can order one. You can form a local Friends of Roots group in Sarasota. And of course, if you know people who might want to support the work that have great influence or great means, make the connection through the website or approach us after the event. Let's go to the next slide. My personal website is ravhanan.org. There's some more edgy things there that we don't put on the Roots website. If you want to read some deeper analysis of situations, we have an American Friends of Roots, a board that works in America to further our work. You can join them if you're a businesswoman, or you're a lawyer, or a social media person, or a tech person. Let's go to the next slide. We also have a campus affiliate. If you have children on campus, we have a TIDNA, which is our campus affiliate. It's now at UT Austin and the University of Pennsylvania and at Harvard, and we'd like to create more and more chapters. You can intern with us on the ground. You can intern with us in America. You can join their annual Roots Run for Reconciliation, which is a group of Israelis and Palestinians, about 80 people, doing a mini marathon together, and we have people around the world running with us at the same time, raising money. Let's go to the next slide, which is probably one of the last ones. Fill up your social media page, of course, not just with the bad news that everyone else fills it up with. Fill it up with good news of reconciliation, of seeing the other side, of two truths in one heart. Let's go on. Okay, learn Hebrew and learn Arabic. If you visit the Holy Land, visit both Israel and Palestine, not just one side or the other side. A synagogue group or a church group that comes to visit the Holy Land, visit us. Please reach out to other people of different religions in your community. Last sentence. If you came here tonight as a strong supporter of Israel, we hope you leave as a strong supporter of Israel. And if you came here tonight as a strong supporter of Palestine, we hope you leave as a strong supporter of Palestine. We understand deeply that if the Palestinians don't get what they need, want, and deserve, Israel will not get what it needs, wants, and deserves. And if Israel doesn't get what it needs, wants, and deserves, the Palestinians won't get what they need, want, and deserve. And therefore, the ultimate message is pro-Palestine, pro-Israel. That's really the only way to be pro a better future for both peoples. Thank you very much.
My name is Andrew Hudson. I'm with Covenant Mennonite. We're one of the sponsors of tonight's gathering, and it's my honor to thank you both gentlemen for traveling from your land, your holy land, to our land, and coming and sharing a message of listening. Thank you all for coming, especially you in front, and bringing passion and experience, obviously, of your own. And we're very inspired by the message of listening, that we don't have to force dialogue. We can still listen without having an easy dialogue. That was a great message. That is a new one to me. I learned something tonight. I want to invite all of us to reflect on the movement that's currently happening, because we've heard about the Nakba. We've heard that there has been a catastrophe that has flared up again. It's not just in the history. But history is not just a fatal thing. The current thing, elaborate on that. I am not qualified to elaborate on that. We have heard from people who know a lot more than I do. And I will love to talk with you afterwards. But I want to challenge us all to learn to listen more deeply and to recognize that there is a huge wave of young people who are doing something new. We are a mostly older group here. And I would challenge all of us to find a young person to support who is doing something new that hasn't been done before. This country has new movements that have never been done before in response to what is happening in the Holy Land. So I invite us all to reflect, how can I support a young person in doing something deeper and profound? And please go forth and help make the world better by telling the truth about what's going on in Israel, Palestine. Thank you. Go in peace.